Jeff Teper, welcome into the Copilot Studio, mate. Now, it's really a bit of a surreal moment for me. I have been watching you and listening to you and looking at you on stage, and we are just talking off air just then that, look, I don't get to a lot of the big conferences where we've got all these selfies and people interacting with you. So it's really good, and I really appreciate you taking the time to have a chat with me.
Thank you, Daniel. I'm excited to do it. I admired your impact on the community, and I'm always excited to get tough questions that hopefully are on top of your mind and top of a lot of people's minds. So,
well, we'll see how many tough questions we can fire at you now. I know your time is very valuable. So just before we jump in, you're probably not going to need a hell of a lot of introduction, but for the people that don't know you, that are watching and listening, just tell me, helicopter view, who Jeff Teper is and what it is that you're doing right now, what's keeping you busy.
Yeah, I've been in Microsoft 32 years. It was 32 years in March. I started out not knowing where I wanted to work, so I sort of started in between engineering and business and developer evangelism. And after a couple of years, I realized I wanted to go back to building things like I'd done before Microsoft, and worked on a few things. There was a product not many people remember, some do, called Site Server. We rebooted it, we merged it with a few other things, and it became the server for Office, SharePoint. Now there was like a couple of different things. .NET came along, we sort of got it all right by version 2 with SharePoint Portal building on Windows SharePoint services, and it grew. And then the cloud came along, and we had to stretch and re-architect, and SharePoint became, the largest content cloud in the space. And then a few years ago, in I think it was 2017, we launched Teams, and then the founder of that retired from Microsoft. So 10 days before the pandemic, I picked up responsibility for Teams. And that was a story unto itself. We sort of knew it was going to grow, but we didn't know it was going to grow 50x. And then, I've done a few other things. Portfolio's expanded. I won't go through it all. But obviously, the big thing that's infused across Microsoft right now is AI and Copilot in particular. Probably the biggest data source for Copilot is SharePoint, and probably the biggest engagement surface for Copilot is Teams. So we're right in the thick of it.
Yeah, and before we'll dive into Copilot in a little bit as well. But look, you've obviously had a really big history and backstory with SharePoint. I do have a little bit of a nostalgic SharePoint hat on and a little logo there as well. It's obviously evolved significantly since its inception and since you've been working with it. Now, I was recently just talking to a colleague of mine, Vlad Kaftranescu, about SharePoint, and we touched on the importance of SharePoint and how, look, there was some debate a little bit of time ago where everybody thought SharePoint was dead. Teams was coming along, SharePoint's going to disappear and all that sort of stuff. But really, SharePoint is the center of everything. And as Vlad and I were talking about, it kind of, nothing else really works without SharePoint these days, even Copilot.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, SharePoint powers OneDrive and SharePoint sites. So let's start there, files and sites. Core of SharePoint. Customers are adding, and this will blow your mind, there's 2 million new SharePoint sites made each and every day.
Yeah, wow.
Over 2 billion files are put in SharePoint each and every day. So it's growing faster than ever for the core files and sites. But as you said, Stream and Teams recordings are stored in SharePoint now. We did that transition a couple of years ago. Loop documents stored in SharePoint. A lot of the new Viva capabilities, like Viva Connections or on Viva Amplifier, built on SharePoint. And then, as you said, the number one data source that people often look to when Copilot answers things is from SharePoint. So SharePoint is, I've said for 20 years, is both an app for storing documents and making websites and a platform for everything from video to loop. And it is, it is growing faster than ever, is probably the largest commercial SaaS fabric of anything in tech.
Mm. So do you think it's growing faster now than it has? I mean, there's a big change from SharePoint Classic to SharePoint Modern, obviously, and that seemed to really give SharePoint another life. People have had this love-hate relationship with SharePoint, coming from maybe some bad experiences with SharePoint Classic, and then this new modern UI came along. Look, the enhancements that you're bringing with along with the team to modern SharePoint, and there's a stack of stuff coming that is really exciting, some of which we can, some of which we can't talk about. But do you think the use of SharePoint now is even greater than it had? I guess it's kind of nuanced a little bit in terms of, people are using SharePoint even though that they're not thinking that they're using SharePoint like in
that's
Teams.
exactly. I think that's exactly it. Way more people are using it now than ever. The percentage growth rate is still pretty impressive, but the absolute growth rate is incredible. Over 1 trillion files last year, I think over 500 million sites last year. So, but to your point, that there's a set of users who may just be working with documents that, say, in 2013 may have gone to the website and uploaded it to SharePoint. Some of that activity is just like save it to OneDrive, but OneDrive is just SharePoint. It's a my site. And in fact, we're migrating, people may not know this, but we're migrating hundreds and hundreds of millions of consumer OneDrives onto SharePoint sort of quietly without, hopefully, any user experience changes. So some of the file activity where people saw SharePoint's team site UI, they're seeing the OneDrive UI where the OneDrive UI hosted in Teams, but it's still just SharePoint. People are making more websites, a lot more websites than ever, because it's a lot easier. When we did the Future of SharePoint event in 2016, we made it way more out of box. We've enhanced that since. There's a lot more stuff coming. One of the things that we just went to dog food internally on, was my favorite thing, is now we have co-authoring of SharePoint pages. So two people can work simultaneously on the same pages. And there's a lot of other stuff coming with branding and styling and co-auth and so forth. So there is absolute growth in the number of website making. I think, I sort of defy anybody to find any other product that people are making 2 million new websites a day on. But it is true, some people who might have gone to the SharePoint site 10 years ago or just think in their head they're uploading the document to OneDrive. But OneDrive's just SharePoint.
And well, do you think on that point then, what do you see in terms of how SharePoint's being used? Traditionally, maybe just using it for file storage and file access and sharing and things like that. We've obviously got this page and news and this authoring canvas that's really amazing tool now. You speak about SharePoint as being a website. How are you seeing it either internally, really Microsoft or customers?
Yeah, a set of us will talk about this stuff from times in technologies, but most customers want to talk about use cases. So a lot of the use cases are for team collaboration. Let's do a project. Let's do it on a team site or a team site connected into Teams. So project management, collaboration, huge use case. Next is employee engagement and communication. Could be the overall company website or the HR website or the sales website. Got a bunch of documents, may have some videos using our Stream product, which streamed out of SharePoint and built with templates in SharePoint. And they may move up the stack to Viva Connections, which is built on SharePoint. So employee communications is one. There's a flavor of that's knowledge management, where it lets organize a repository with search and metadata, now AI and Copilot, and sort of have this be the company's central knowledge base that's searching information. Again, they could be going to a website, a SharePoint site for that, where they could be just asking Copilot questions, but the repository is SharePoint. There's also a ton, I think people would be shocked about the amount of business process solutions for workflows, on contracts, on invoices. Some of those people do out of the box in SharePoint. Some people use the SharePoint framework or Power Platform, Power Automate, Power Apps to build those business apps. Many people don't know still the biggest data source for Power Platform is actually SharePoint.
Right.
And then in those cases, those sort of business process ones, I'm really excited about something we announced a couple of years ago is Microsoft Syntex, but we renamed, I think more clearly, SharePoint Premium last fall at Ignite, where you now have optical character recognition, language translation, tailored models for different types of documents, digital signatures, inferring metadata from content and populating the columns automatically, a whole bunch of stuff for these business processes. So those are sort of the big four: collaboration, employee engagement, knowledge repositories, and business processes.
Yeah, I think it's important to highlight those because there's a lot of people that still just do use it for file management and file storage, but there's so much more capabilities in the platform now. And the things that are inside now SharePoint Premium are really adding a ton of value and saving a lot of time, especially around those business processes. Now, if we think about this,
it's something that companies have made the bet on Microsoft 365, and we have sort of the regional data centers, the compliance capabilities, auditing, e-discovery, information barriers, DLP, on and on and on.
Yeah,
they realize, why have a different content fabric or content platform for each of your 100 different mission critical content apps? You already got one. You're already paying for it in SharePoint. Why not build the solutions on it? And so this light bulb has gone off in a whole bunch of companies. And you're, I'm sure, familiar with the SharePoint framework and Power Platform. The integration of those both with SharePoint is just skyrocketing for these business processes because they want a common, secure, collaborative knowledge repository.
Yeah. Do you think that's a goal of? Let me just say Microsoft as a whole, but the Microsoft 365 platform, there are businesses that are, as you say, using different applications for different discrete purposes. When the M365 platform we just spoke about, pretty much running an entire business there around that. It's probably just a little bit of knowledge awareness that people just don't know what the platform can do when they do go out and have these other third-party systems.
Yeah. And, I think, look, you're not going to build your ERP system on the SharePoint data store. We're not overselling, but if it's content-centric, it totally makes, and including integration with your ERP or CRM system, it makes sense. And so we do, we have a huge number of customers that have hundreds of applications that are built on the SharePoint content repository that integrate inside teams. And then to your point, some customers are still discovering it, but it's not like a new thing for thousands and thousands of organizations are already doing this stuff.
Yeah. Now let's fast forward what seems to be not that long ago, but let's fast forward to today. And obviously we're in this new era of AI, generative AI, and this thing that we call Copilots taking over the world, taking over Microsoft. But in the context of SharePoint, before we move into the Copilot space, how important is a good SharePoint architecture, a good SharePoint information architecture around when we're starting to think about Copilot?
Yeah. It is really important, but some people, as you know, having been in the space for a while, can get to analysis paralysis. We have, every organization is different. Like, to take two very extreme examples, when I talk to investment banks, it's actually incredibly important. They're all big SharePoint customers, that their information architecture is very siloed because deal teams can't know about other deals. It's sacrosanct for their reputation. And so they they have very strict security requirements. And of course, we support them in SharePoint. Then there's other companies that also care about security, but in a different angle. Take a pharmaceutical company that's got people doing drug development around the world. And they want to promote the knowledge they have across the world because, two researchers in different parts of the planet, if they know about each other's work, may come up with some new synthesis of the ideas, and that's where the breakthrough is. And so they want to actively promote knowledge sharing. And so the solution that would work for a big pharmaceutical company and a big investment bank are different. They all come with making some choices around a few things. One is, what are your site policy? Are you going to let people create them by default or not? And what are the templates you have? And that includes classification labels. So, as you well know, we have the ability to say, is this a top secret site? Is it a confidential site? Is it a public site? Are they derived from certain templates? Like maybe you want a template for your sales offices, for your sales office or can be consistent. So it's good that people think about those things. There's sort of security posture. How many templates do they really need? But people also tend to overdo that stuff and try to design the perfect solution. And this is the thing about collaboration software. There's human beings involved. And so if you make it too complicated, they're not going to use it. If you say, in order to upload a file, you have to fill out like 52 pieces of metadata. You can build that solution in SharePoint. And there are some solutions where you need a lot of metadata. But if you don't actually need it, just like don't overdo it. And so I think having an architecture for your site hierarchy, and we have, we made this a lot more flexible. When we first started SharePoint, we had portals and sites and subsites, and people got mad because they get it wrong and couldn't redo it. We now have this concept called hubs, and you can, if you died, you didn't get it right, and you just wanted things to be moved over to some other part of the company, you can sort of change the site navigation and so forth. So it is important that you do some basic mapping out of your templates, your labels, and your site hierarchy. But don't overdo it, and like don't ignore real world feedback. Are people using the thing?
Yeah, I think, from an architectural point of view, I think the access to that content probably becomes more important than, metadata and things like that. I think people are a little bit concerned at the moment that Copilot's going to, surface information that it shouldn't and that type of thing. But we've, as you know, we've already seen sort of that thing with Delve and, things coming up when potentially they thought they shouldn't, but it's always been there. It's always been a problem. It's just that this is kind of, exacerbating that type of thing.
Yeah. I think I probably spent as much time on when customers, I probably talk to 2 or 3 customers a day and on Copilot and AI in general. And the 3 or 4 things they talk about are ROI, change management, governance, which you just hit on, and then solutions integrating with what they have. So on the governance side, SharePoint is the best place to manage it because it has a very flexible security model, and Copilot honors that. So we never use your data or prompts to train the model. Nobody ever sees them, so you don't have to worry about that. Copilot honors the security permissions and the labels in SharePoint. So there will be no unintended disclosure if you've done those things right. If you are not sure, we have something called SharePoint Advanced Management that will scan your system and give you a sense of, what your permissions are after the fact. We have some very large, it's probably not needed for 90% of customers, but the 10% that are the largest ones, we have customers that have petabytes of data in their system. They're using SharePoint Advanced Management to sort of just take a top-down check on their permissions. And then we introduced something else as sort of an interim step where some customers said, I really want to get going with SharePoint and Copilot right now. But I want to go back and look at all my permissions and decide for a variety of reasons, like are are we too open or too closed? And so we introduced something called restricted SharePoint search, where you can say, hey, in the first phase of your Copilot appointment, go Copilot right now, and you can tell it to only respect these 10 SharePoint sites. Say you have your top level portal, your marketing site, your sales site, and you just want to get going, HR site, you just want to get going with that, and then go back and look at all your collaboration sites. Now, it turns out you're going to lose a lot of value doing that, because then AI won't be applied to any collaborative activity, and the people on the team, even the confidential team, won't be able to get summaries of their content and insights and learn and grow and all that. But some customers have said, hey, please just give me that as a first step. So we did announce this thing called SharePoint restricted search that lets people get going if they really want to minimize the surface area in their first phase of Copilot.
So when customers ask you and clients ask you about return on investment, how do you tackle that area? How do you, I guess, how do you explain what it's quite easy for us to see that, but how did you tackle that question?
Yeah, there's sort of two sides to this, personal and organizational. Personal is, do we make the individual more productive? Are they getting more done? Right. So I think you can look at what we did. About 3 years ago, we introduced with the second generation large language model, GitHub Copilot. That was a while ago. Now at this point, anybody who's used it, anybody who's just studied these things, is said a no-brainer that the productivity of a developer with GitHub Copilot, they write 30 to 50% more code, and they're happier, and their code is higher quality. So we're 3 years into that journey, and people are like, I get it. I can decide whether my developers will write more code, or I'll have fewer developers writing more code. That's every organization's different there. But on a personal level, it's like widespread evidence that developer ROI with AI is there. So with the fourth generation model, we introduced last year sort of the information worker solution with Copilot for M365. We introduced that in November. It's now April. We are starting to get some of that same data, and it's pretty clear that 20, 30% productivity, depending on the role and how you use it. But just take the meeting Copilot. Imagine being able to skip one meeting a day, but still going back and getting the insights from the meeting, or going back on some meeting that happened like 2 weeks ago and say, what decisions did we make again? It's much earlier than we were on the developer one, because we're only 6 months as opposed to 3 years into it, but people are starting to see that. Yeah. So that's the individual side. The organization side, when I talk to people, they are more focused on top level metrics. So, hey, in sales, am I going to generate more sales? In customer service, am I going to process more service requests? A lot of companies' growth is a function, their expenses are a function of growth. If I want to grow revenues, I need this same number of salespeople, if not more. If I want to grow customers, I have to grow my services and support infrastructure. And that's where those projects take a little longer, because they're more business applications. Right. But between Microsoft Copilot, Copilot Studio, you may have seen us do Copilot for services and Copilot for sales that integrate with your various services, apps, and CRM apps. There we're seeing, and we're quantifying the ROIs, the payback periods, 100 to 300%. Microsoft, I think, is saved already using our own Copilot for services product ourselves in Microsoft support. We've saved $100 million and increased the satisfaction of customer increase coming in. So I think it's early. And so each month we're going to have new data so people believe it, if you will. But we'll have data on individual productivity, and we'll have data on organizational ROI.
Yeah, it's funny. You may have heard this. There was this statement or comment as well. There was the Microsoft AI World Tour that's obviously going around at the moment. Yeah. There was one in Sydney, and and there was a chat with the Commonwealth Bank. I think it was the CIO, and he asked the employees whether they would prefer and don't quote me on this, but it was a $50 a month meal voucher or a Copilot license. So there was, I think, again, it was around about 73, 78% chose the Copilot license over the meal voucher, right? Now, I'm not sure what that's saying about the food at that company, but you can see that the impact at a personal level that it's making.
Yeah, and that's just V1 6 months after. Yep.
Really?
So that's pretty good. It's only going to get better, and it's going to get a lot better. I mean, AI in the industry, not just from us, but AI is going to get so much better. I won't jump the gun, but I'm more excited about what we're announcing in the next 6 months than even the last 6 months. And, some of it will be things business leaders get excited about, but I'm really excited about the end user side of this. We'll see if we can drive that 73 or 76% up to 100.
Now, you've obviously been in and seen a lot of technologies over your time at Microsoft. Where do you think, where we are now with this AI play? How does this compare to the launch of Teams? We've had Viva, even the early days of SharePoint. Where do you see this AI revolution almost sitting? Are you as excited now as you've ever been with what's here? Not only just now, but what's coming.
Yeah, I'd caveat it still. It's still pretty early. There's still a lot of things for us as an industry to work through. But it's funny when we first started doing SharePoint and said, go to use a server, or when we first said, go to the cloud, or first said, go to Teams and use open collaboration with chats and channels as opposed to email. There was like the dreaded change management came in. It's like, you got to do change management. And IT talked about it for their users, but they really meant for themselves. Like the one that was sort of the middle part of my career, that was the slog, was the journey to the cloud. I remember being at the SharePoint conference in, I think it was 2012, where we were leading with the cloud. Then we had announced it at SharePoint Conference 2008. We did Office 365 as a rebrand in 2011, 2012. We really pivoted the primary sessions to be about the cloud. And our customers and even our best partners were annoyed at us. They said, like, what are you doing? We're never going to the cloud. And, it's not blah, 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 blah. And we knew we could run it cheaper, more secure, and people would get new value every month as opposed to every 5 years because of the deployment cycles. But it was a slog. There was like years and years of us pushing on a rope with, say, 80% of the market. 20% of the market was like, they got it and went.
Yeah,
they were. The rest of the world should be grateful because they went through with us with our down the learning curve for us. For sure, in the first few years, we made a bunch of mistakes, and the early adopters were usually patient with us, but sometimes not, and sometimes we didn't deserve to be patient with. But by 2013, 14, 15, 16, we were ready, and so it took a long time, and then the pandemic. Teams was different because the pandemic gave people no option. They had no preparation. They had no choice. They had to go to distributed collaboration outside their data center, whether they picked us or somebody else, and whether it was get their users ready or their firewalls and VPNs. Oh my God, there was like a year where we taught everybody about split tunneling and not routing the traffic for teams onto their own network. versus from people's homes directly to our cloud. But that one, because there was no choice, Teams didn't take 10 years like Office 365 did. It chugged along pretty well from 2017 to 2020, but between March and June of 2020, it was boom. Like people, there was nobody running. I mean, there were actually a few, but there was almost nobody running, say, on-prem Skype for Business. Almost nobody. There were some. Copilot's different. It doesn't require all the change management within IT that the cloud did. There is a lot of excitement. Users are more tech savvy than they were certainly when the cloud came along. But even Teams in 2017, we're talking 2024. And I do still have IT. I met with an IT leader about 3 weeks ago who said, we need to give our users a printed sheet of paper of all the steps they should use to use Copilot successfully. Like, our users need that. And I'm sure there are people who do need that. And it's our responsibility to give. We have adoption guides from Caruana and team that are just awesome. But a lot of people are figuring this out faster than their IT groups, where they're turning on Copilot and Microsoft 365 and just firing away prompt after prompt. Write me a business plan for this new serial launch. What's a good way to make the point on a growth area to somebody in a performance review? Write me a sales proposal for a customer. Write a blog post that's leverages AI in its themes, but doesn't get too jargony. People without, when the PC was introduced, you had to send people through the week-long class of Excel or even SharePoint. Now it's not like you need you just need, hey, you can ask it these 5 or 10 things, like summarize my last meeting. I want to catch up on all the conversations with Daniel. So it's in 60 seconds, you can get people to see the value of it. The Copilot Studio custom AIs things is a little bit different story, but the end user side of this stuff, it's not the learning curve. It's not the change management for IT the cloud was, and it's certainly not the learning curve that even Teams was. So I'm pretty excited about the uptake because it's expensive, because the GPUs are expensive. It's not, IT isn't rolling it out to, all, 400 million licensed Microsoft 365 users in minutes, but people are able to go out to our free consumer Copilot and play with it and get a sense of it. So there are some things that are, pretty much faster than the previous waves, I would say.
Do you think that's because ChatGPT's come beforehand and people maybe have used that for a period of time as well, and it kind of translates across?
That certainly helped. I think, there's enough competition and efficiency in the market that regardless of whatever mix people have of Microsoft, Google, OpenAI, 12 other things, whoever they've tried, after a day, if they've gotten creative on the prompts, they've figured out this is going to be pretty useful. But that certainly helps. And then, lots of times customers come to us and ask us about that and say, we have to sort of go through it pretty, we have to be clearer than maybe we were in the early stages of marketing Copilot and say, just go to copilot.microsoft.com, go to that URL or install the Copilot app, and you get the web scope, which is like ChatGPT, or you get the work scope, which is AI that accesses your data, your docs, your emails, your chats. And in both cases, there's enterprise-grade security. We don't share your data. We don't share your prompts. All your access controls, conditional access, classifications and labels are respected. So you're right. If somebody's used ChatGPT, they sort of get it. And then we just say, this is that with your data and better security.
What about yourself personally? You've obviously been dog fooding Copilot for probably more than or longer than most people on the planet.
Yeah.
How are you using it, and what value is it giving you personally?
I use it a lot for summarization. I've been here for a while, so I have a lot of context in the company, but the speed of which things are going on is pretty intense. So I'll give you an example. Like, I try not to have like a lot of meetings on my calendar on a recurring basis, because that just creates a lot of bureaucracy for the team. And, it's better to free up people's time to get work done and to have meetings when you need to. But we do, in each of the teams, have a product day once a month, a SharePoint product day and a Teams product day. And so everybody who attends the meeting gets the pre-read for those. And we did this new feature in OneDrive, integrating Copilot to summarize these documents. And so I summarized the 10 gigantic decks for our last Teams product day. And I scanned the summaries, and like 8 of the 10 are like, yep, got it. I understand what's going on. I knew some of that anyway. I'll be fine seeing it in the meeting. There were 2 where it was like, this is new or complicated, or maybe even I don't really agree with the summary. Let me go open those decks and go. And so I thought, wow, this used to be like 2 hours of prep for me the day before one of these to come in respectfully prepared for the things so people wouldn't have to read the slides one by one. And I cut it down to 15 minutes. And it wasn't
huge.
Overly lossy compression. So that is my favorite recent example. And then, so that's for somebody who's got a big job and has been here for a million years. The thing that I think is really fun for me is when I talk to brand new people to Microsoft who are like, oh my God, this is such a big team and a big company. There's so much going on. I feel so overwhelmed. How do I keep up to date? And like, I'm afraid to talk in a meeting because everybody knows so much more than me. And it's like, hey, Copilot's your best friend. Just ask Copilot a bunch of questions. You know what? Every acronym you're confused by, every strategy, every technical architecture layering, just go ask Copilot. And, it won't be 20 for 20, but maybe it'll be 15 for 20, and you'll feel smarter. And so one of my favorite things to do is in various meetings when I get to talk to newer members of the team is just say, try it out. Ask a question that you're sort of expert on Microsoft on your shoulder. And so that's sort of this fun indirect use of Copilot where I want people, I do remember when I joined the company and I worked, not because anybody made me, but because I was so curious and I was feeling so sheepish that I didn't know what all these people who'd worked here 10, 20 years was. So I stayed here like all night reading docs because I felt like I had to, if I didn't know everything, I didn't know anything. And, I'm just really excited that the early in career people don't have to do it that way and they can just use Copilot to ask whatever question they want. And most of the time they'll get a good answer.
What are you excited about the most, and what can you share about sort of where this is going in the next sort of 6 to 12 months? I know there's a few big conferences coming out, that you're speaking at, you're keynoting at. What's coming up that you can share that you don't have to share specifics, but in general, sort of the concept of things?
Yeah, I think there'll be much more than I'll reference, but one thing I'm really excited about is companies building solutions with AI that automate workflows, get access to expertise, put it in that context of teams, et cetera. And so if you think about a couple of technologies we have today, and I'll talk about them today, and then you sort of can imagine and you'll know what I mean soon. One is the ability to have bots in teams.
Yeah.
That people with bot framework have built these bots in teams, some of them connected to the Power Platform or other data sources, other ways to connect to data sources, and sort of automated workflows or let you answer questions. And like a lot of customer service bots we see on websites, they're useful, but they're not very resilient to ambiguity. Well, the LLMs are going to make those things very flexible and very easy to create. So we already have a very primitive version of this stuff with something called the the AI toolkit for Teams, where somebody can basically plug in a custom LLM-based bot into Teams, and it can be there to chat with you one-on-one as well as chat with the group. That's one angle. The other angle is Copilot Studio, where Copilot Studio, the best renaming we've ever done in the history of Microsoft, and I've been for like a lot of renamings. I think Syntax to SharePoint Premium is my most recent one that I've been involved in. So you can poke fun at us. We have renamed things a lot, but the best one we've ever done is PVA to Copilot Studio, where there's over 1,200 data sources for Power Apps Virtual Agent, including SharePoint. You can connect it to the language model, and you can sort of do where you can't trust the LLM to do logic for you. You can sort of do it with a more orchestrated thing, but you can use the LLM to speak whatever the human being speaks. But once you've figured out what the logic is you want to enforce, you can sort of do that with more sort of procedural logic in Copilot Studio. And so that thing's pretty magical. So if you take those two things, the ability to have a bot that's AI based and plug it into Teams and chats and channels, if you think about Copilot Studio taking a lot of the work out of building those against any back, and then sort of multiply that vision by 10, I think you're going to start to see the power of AI transforming collaboration in business processes in a pretty amazing way. And I think Microsoft's uniquely positioned to do that because we have the best collaboration hub in Teams, because we have the most flexible content management system in SharePoint, because we have the best low-code tools in Power Platform. Those three things infused with AI and put in a group collaborative business process context is going to lead to such a leap in the next 6-12 months. I'm really excited about it. So I think that's sort of the vision. I only talked about things that are shipping today, but there will be more to come in this space.
There certainly will, and there's some big conferences obviously coming up, as I mentioned. That, a lot of this stuff will be announced and probably demoed, I would imagine, by yourself. Now, I know time's very valuable, so we'll start to wrap things up. Now, I'm going to put you on the spot here. You do a lot of talks. You talk to a lot of people. You do a lot of interviews. Is there a question that hasn't been asked of you that you think should be?
Gosh, I know what it is, and I'm pausing for a second to say it because then I'll have to answer it, but let's do it. I think it'd be, what's your biggest failure and what did you learn from it? I think actually that's a great question to ask anybody reasonably far in their career. So that'd be the question.
So what's the answer?
I think there are two things. It's a tie. One is we did launch the cloud with Microsoft Online Services BPOS in 2008. But I hedged my bets for a few years because I believed what our customers were telling me, that they would not go to the cloud. And I would say there were peers of mine in the company and outside in tech, including Google, Amazon, Salesforce, that said, we're not going to listen to customers so carefully. We're going to bet ahead of them. Right. And I wish, as loud as the feedback was, even in 2012, and 13 and 14, I should have, I'm going to just say it, put more of the team on the cloud version of SharePoint versus the on-prem version of SharePoint. And even if people had been annoyed with me over it. And so that's including my own team, because our team, in 2011 didn't think the market was going to swing to the cloud was.
Yeah.
And so we swung, we did shift. Yeah. We did a lot of things to shift to the cloud, but I could have swung this faster. The other is this is a much more specific one. We used some technology we acquired for Groove for OneDrive sync that didn't work. And sometimes you can re-architect things and evolve them. Sometimes you just need to start over. We did start over with the next generation sync client in 2014 or 15 that we shipped in 2016, and is now, part of the reason, a huge part of the reason we have 1 trillion new files a year going to OneDrive and SharePoint is because the sync client and the co-authoring support is mature. But that wasn't mature in 2012 or 13. And I should have pulled the ripcord on that and started over.
Very good.
We did. It'd be good, but our customers and our business would have been better served if I'd done it faster.
Good question to ask yourself, and even better answers. Very honest and open. Very good. Now, what's coming up for you? There's a couple of big things happening, a couple of big conferences.
Yeah, so we have the M365, Microsoft 365 conference, April 30th, Orlando, Florida. I'm very, very, very excited that we're going to be in a different place than we've been in Vegas for a while, so being in Orlando. It is going to be the biggest and best one we've done. I think it's going to be the biggest M365 event since Ignite of 2019. It's 150 people from the team. It is going to be the first time my parents and kids have seen me give a keynote.
Oh, wow.
If you're there at the conference, you can say hello to them, but don't bother them too much. Just say hello. So I've sort of a personal spring in my step that this better be my best keynote yet, because my mom is going to give me a grade afterwards. And, I've never had that.
Then you'll get some honest feedback, won't you?
Yeah. She'll say, I didn't understand any of it, but you were cute. That's what I bet $10. That's what 10 Australian dollars. And then build tends to be more, M365 conference tends to be medium on news, high on depth and skilling and community. Build tends to be high on news, but a little less on depth, number of sessions and so forth. So we will have some stuff at end of May at Build that I think is, that's where we sort of the thread that runs across Microsoft, everything from the data center in Silicon to the language models to the apps to the tools all sort of comes together. I saw a mail from Satya to some of us today that said, we better bring our A game to Build. And so I think we are. I'm actually really, really excited about both events.
Is there more pressure from Satya or from your mother and your family? Where are you feeling the most pressure?
I think it's equal, because I think, the best pressure is obviously from our customers and partners, because they get to choose whether they bet on us or not. So that's, in the end, the rest of this stuff is actually kind of noise. If customers buy it and use it, everything else takes care of itself. But I am thinking about I'm representing senior leadership at Microsoft. I have an obligation to do a great job representing a lot of people in the company and telling the story and helping us break through in a very crowded tech market. And so, yes, Satya asking us all to do a great job. That's a set of pressure. It's not unhealthy or anything. It's just like, hey, we got to show up and make the employees of the company proud and help our business. But it is kind of, I think having my parents and kids there is causing me to think about in a different way. Okay, am I going to be simple and clear and compelling? Don't use any jargon, just make it, my mom's not going to fire up Copilot Studio. But I at least sort of want her to understand these companies are going to use AI to change hundreds of the things way they work. And we have this tool that helps you do that. And so I am thinking about both pressures, and I think both pressures are helping me bring my A game. I mean, you guys will judge based on like how well I do, whether it came to anything. But I like pressure. I love it. I want each event to be better than the last one.
I'm gonna have to tune in and see how you respond. Very good. All right. That's the pod. Thank you very much, Jeff. As I said at the start, really appreciate you taking the time. Let's have a chat. It's been a great conversation. I could talk to you forever, but we'll wrap it up there. We'll have to do it again.
Not good day.
Thanks again.
Thank you.